Hey y'all, I'm Ellen. We've been super inspired by our journeys of self-healing and discovery.
And I'm Sam, and we want to share our experiences with you to help you get curious about yourself, reconnect, and get intentional about your life so you know what makes you happy.
Welcome to Woo New, the podcast. So we just had our first mail on this podcast, which I just realized just now.
M-A-I-L.
Yeah. M-A-L-E. Yeah. Ben Page, who is such an awesome person. He is the director of training for the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. And so we got to pick his brain and just learn all about forest therapy, where it came from, which is this Japanese practice called Shinrin Yoku, which directly translates into forest bath or forest bathing. Oh my gosh, this is probably one of my favorite conversations that we've had so far. And it's because I think I'm meant to be a forest therapy guide.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm low-key obsessed with him, actually.
Yeah.
And he's probably going to hear this and get super freaked out about it because we haven't ever even met in person. But he was so smart and he was so open, and he just, like, I have a whole new appreciation for what he does and the trainings that he is doing and this form of wellness that's so accessible that he's spreading. And it's, I mean, I don't disagree. I think like that training would be so epic.
Yeah, exactly.
He's so incredible.
And I think for myself too, and it's so funny because he actually mentions this in the interview, but I really do consider myself a nature enthusiast, like many people, and I hike a lot, and and it really wasn't until I had my very first and only forest therapy walk, which was about 3 hours long, that I came to a better understanding of what it actually means to be in relationship with nature and to be conscious about our plant friends and really actually form a relationship with them. It was, oh my God, beyond. Yeah.
Yeah. I recently had this meltdown, and by recently I meant last night. And so in the middle of the night, I went out and I was sitting by this little sad tree that's on the side of our house. That's actually a very beautiful tree. But I realized as I was looking, it sounds like I was tripping, but I swear to God, I wasn't. I realized as I was looking at the branches, they would actually move and come toward my face, just ever so barely, to the point where I was sort of looking around, like trying to figure out if some wind was coming through. But it wasn't. It was like I was having an actual conversation with this tree, and it was the craziest thing that I've ever done. And I could totally feel it. And I was like, Ben's right. This is magic.
It really is. And I mean, I love what he said about we look at every pine tree and we think, oh, that's a pine tree, but without really realizing that, they're all individuals in the same way that we humans are all individuals, and man, I don't know. Even being a nature lover, I started seeing nature in a completely different way. And then also seeing, his other point about us. We are nature, right? Like we are nature. The houses that we live in, even if they're in urban environments, that is nature too. Like everything is nature. We are all truly connected. And so it really started getting me thinking, like when we say the words, I need to go out into nature, it's now shifting my perspective. Like,
yes.
When I'm at home or walking around downtown LA, that is nature. I am surrounded by buildings, but what are the buildings made out of? They're all natural materials,
Yeah. And then when he said that he's had, these experiences by just sitting at the base of a tree in a parking lot, I was like, preach. This is the best thing I've ever heard. Like, this is accessible to everyone.
Yeah. And so important, and truly almost kind of the answer to human existence and saving our planet is really just this relationship. So,
oh my gosh, you guys are going to all want to try this after you hear this interview. It's so good.
All right. So today we're sitting with Ben Page, who is the director of training of the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're really excited to talk to you because, Sam, I can't remember if you had read this book, the forest bathing book, but it's by Dr. Ching Lee. And I think I picked it up in 2018.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about it and we've talked about this extensively, but I haven't had the opportunity to read about it yet. So I have been looking forward to this interview for a long time.
Yeah, the book is fascinating. So I'm like, I have so many questions that I feel like your knowledge is going to like fill in a lot of those blanks for us. But maybe just to start, especially for our listeners who don't know what forest therapy is, if you could just define it in your own words.
Sure. Forest therapy, the way I conceptualize it, is a practice of remembering our relationships with the world. So cultivating a healthy relationship with myself, with other humans, with the more than human world, and with this moment in time. There's kind of this emerging conversation globally about what is forest therapy. And I feel like the divide here is kind of between people that want to pigeonhole it into being about human health outcomes. Mm-hmm. So from that side, it's like, forest therapy is really about biological and psychological health. And then there's kind of this other side, which I guess I place myself on, which acknowledges that all of those health benefits exist and are there and are important. But the concern is that forest therapy could become an extractive wellness process where it's thinking about nature as a health and wellness resource and saying, how can we extract wellness from nature for human benefit?
So yeah, kind of like Bach flowers, right?
Right. So for me, forest therapy is really about sustainability and reciprocity with the earth. How do we actually shift our ideas about how we're relating to nature in such a way that supports not only the health of human beings, but the health of the entire biosphere? And it's kind of like just acknowledging that all of our health is interconnected, that, you know, humans can't be healthy if we don't have healthy forests and trees and rivers and sky and oceans and all those things. So it's not really, for me, it's not a productive starting point to talk about just human health outcomes without also acknowledging that that also has to be a way of supporting the health of the planet.
So it sounds like it's more about a relationship than it is
it's
about
all about relationship. Street, right?
That's really incredible. And okay, so give us a whole, I mean, I guess maybe a brief sort of history on how forest therapy even came to be known or practiced.
So yeah, this is like a really long, interesting, nuanced conversation, but I'll try to distill it. Basically, in the 1980s, the Japanese were going through a shift in their economy. So they were going from mostly outdoor economy to a tech indoor economy. And there were two big consequences of this. The first was urbanization. So in Japan during the 80s, a lot of people were leaving the rural prefectures to go to the city because that's where all the jobs were. Mm-hmm. And so the rural prefectures were experiencing basically an economic depression because there were no jobs and most of the adult men were leaving their communities without a lot of economic resources. The other thing that was happening was the Japanese government noticed this huge spike in cancer and autoimmune disease. So they put a lot of money into several different research projects, one of which was asking the question of what is the health impact of exposing humans to forest environments? And one of the things that they discovered was that trees keep themselves healthy by showering themselves in these phytochemicals called phytoncides. Phytoncides are antimicrobial, antibacterial, and antifungal chemicals. So let's say a fungus is attacking the tree recognizes this and it diffuses these phytoncides into the air around it, and those phytoncides find the fungus and they kill it. Now, what's really interesting that the Japanese discovered is that because humans have evolved in the forest for so long, when we inhale phytoncides, it triggers the production of a special white blood cell called an NK, or natural killer cell. And NK cells are part of your innate immune system, which means they're not looking for specific diseases. They're looking for cellular growth that is becoming stressed, and they preventatively kill those stressed cells so they never turn into cancer. Wow. So that's kind of like the genesis point of a lot of the research from the Japanese perspective about why is it good to get people into the forest. But then also there was this thing about revitalizing the rural prefectures. So what the Japanese did is they created these, what they call forest therapy roads or forest therapy bases that they would connect by a train. And so you would take the train out to one of these forest therapy bases and spend like a whole weekend there. And, it would be kind of like a whole kind of natural healing workshop where, you're going to do some forest walking, some breath work, some yoga, make some soba noodles, sit in the onsen. And that's where the term Shinrin Yoku comes from. Shinrin forest, Yoku is bath. So Shinrin Yoku is, if you imagine the atmosphere of the forest is kind of like an ocean, and it's filled with these phytoncides and all sorts of other terpenes and chemicals, we're bathing in this rich atmosphere that supports our human health. And it's a little bit of a double entendre because also it's like forest bathing is about being in our senses. So it's like sunbathing is just the experience of feeling what it is like to be in the sunlight. So forest bathing is also about the feeling of what it is to be in the forest. Now, that was in the 1980s, and through the late 80s and the 90s, there were these new forms of what they call forest medicine popping up in Japan. So the first one that came after Shinrin Yoku is called Shinrin Ryoho. And I asked my sensei about like, what does Ryoho mean? And he was like, oh, it's kind of a complicated word. It doesn't really have English, but it's kind of like method. Shinrin Ryoho is more like a diagnostic and prescriptive model where to be trained in that, you have to be a nurse or a doctor. And they work with people with, addiction or chronic disease or occupational therapy. There's all these kind of modalities where it's using principles of forest medicine, but taking it, it's less about health and wellness and more rooted in kind of a traditional medical model. And then there's Shinrin therapy, which is like a whole nother kind of branch of the forest medicine. But one of the things I notice in the West when we talk about Shinrin Yoku is that a lot of people don't understand the depth and breadth of forest medicine in Japanese culture. So ANFT, the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, our founder was really inspired by the health benefits coming out of Shinrin Yoku and some of the kind of core practical elements about, it's not about thinking, it's not about learning the names of the trees and all that stuff. It's really about an embodied, bodyful, sensation-based experience. But his name is Amos Clifford. He founded the association in 2012. One of the things that he had done in his professional career was vision fasting. And a vision fast, for those listeners that don't know, is a 12-day ceremony. And in the middle 4 days, you go out on the land by yourself and you don't eat anything, talk to anyone, or take shelter for 4 days.
Is it called a vision quest as well?
Yes, sometimes known as a vision quest.
Oh, wait. Can you drink, though? Can you drink water while you're out there?
Yes,
oh,
you have to drink water or else you will die.
Yeah, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, you bring a lot of water with you, and there's kind of a system by which they make sure you never run out of water, but you never actually see the facilitators. You like hang a handkerchief on a tree if you want water, and you walk halfway, and then they come and check, and if the handkerchief is there, they leave you water. But anyway, Amos noticed that when people would come out of the vision fast, they would really have had a deep relational experience that not just about, the physical well-being, but they would also have kind of reoriented their priorities about thinking about, how do I love myself? How do I love my community? How do I love the earth? How do I be here in this moment? And he said to himself, this is really necessary for our culture in this moment because of digitization and urbanization, we're becoming progressively more disconnected from ourselves, from others, from the world around us. And he said, this is really needed now. But there's an accessibility problem here. Not everyone has the time or the money or the interest to go on a 12-day ceremony. It's just not feasible for most people. So he said, how can we scale the experience down into 3 hours and start getting people to do the work? And that's kind of where the association really started, from that point of saying, how can we get people to really work on these relationships? So sometimes there's it seems as if there's an internal tension between ANFT's philosophy and the Japanese philosophy. But I always tell people part of this is kind of a cultural thing that Japan, because of the legacy of Zen and Shinto, nature connection is so rooted in their culture that like they have these trees that are the houses for what they call kami, the spirits of Shinto. And people will go and have a relationship with that tree. They sometimes have these big bells. And the idea is when you ring the bell, it wakes the tree up and it also wakes you up. And then you can have a connection, a communication with that tree. And they have kami living in, rivers and mountains and all these different natural environments. So For the Japanese, the way they perceive nature is so different than the way we perceive it in the West, where we've historically, for at least the last 300 years, thought about it mostly as a resource, not as a sentient thing that we can have a relationship with. It's just stuff, it's just stuff out there. So the Japanese in some way don't need to have kind of the pedagogical approach of vision fasting because it's already embedded so deeply in the culture, but that's been lost in most of the Western world. So that's why forest therapy is kind of a culturally neutral and a universal global idea that we all share these bodies and our senses and our, what the Germans call the Umwelt, the experience of being a human being. What is that? And how can that be translated into working in relationship with people?
Wow. I'm like trying to, 10,000 questions just like erupted in my head. So, sorry, going back to the phyton sites.
Yeah.
Are those basically contained in is it synonymous with the essential oils of the trees?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say it's synonymous, but it's very connected, right? Okay. So like terpenes are a big thing in essential oils, that like certain terpenes promote certain biological functions. So like pinene is this one that really works well for respiratory health. Mm-hmm. And pinene comes from pine trees, of course. So that's one of the pieces in this, you're bathing in this chemical wash that is coming from the trees. But then the phyton sides are kind of their own classification of chemical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also, sorry, I'm like replaying everything that you just said. It's really fascinating to me that it makes sense, a lot of sense, to understand the like cultural differences between the West and the Japanese and why this is such an important process. Like I even look at the practice of breath work, and there's holotropic breath work, which is a full day event. And then the breath work that I kind of guide or that is being practiced more in the urban landscape on a more regular basis are the ones that are, they're an hour long. They fit into people's lives a little bit easier. And so a lot of this is like just making it much more applicable to modern life,
right.
I'm curious, like what the 3 hours, I think you said 3 hours of forest therapy, like what that process actually looks like.
So we use a form that we describe as the standard sequence. And it took about 3 years to develop this, but I'll break it down for you just very simply. So we start with hospitality and introduction, right? Just kind of getting people to understand, what are we doing today? Mm-hmm. That's where the mental stuff pretty much ends. So then the next thing we do is an invitation. We call everything an invitation because we're really focused on trauma-informed care, where it's not about you have to do this. It's like, you do it in the way that suits you. You do it in a way that's appropriate for you. So there's no compulsory aspect to any of the invitations. The first invitation we call the pleasures of presence. And it's essentially like a somatic awareness meditation, you could call it. We really shy away from the word meditation because it brings up some really strong connotations for people of like, oh, I know what that looks like. I'm going to do meditation. It's like, well, no, that's not really it. But basically, it's just getting in tune with your body, really focusing deeply on our senses, the 5 Aristotelian senses, plus some, interoceptive senses, and possibly the imagination and other pieces of our awareness. So getting people to shift from their cognitive process into an embodied process. Okay. The next invitation is called What's or Who is in Motion. And it's effectively a slow walk down the trail. And as you move, you just notice everything else that's moving around you. This effectively gets people to slow down. And there's something about the combination of heightening our sensory awareness and slowing ourselves down that is kind of like a threshold into a new way of perceiving reality. We're so used to like walking through the forest in a very fast way. We don't tend to notice a lot of the sensory information that our bodies are processing is processed subconsciously because we're not actually directing our attention towards the sensory process. And we're moving so fast that it's like you barely notice anything. A lot of people, when they go hiking or whatever, it's just about getting to the waterfall or getting to the mountaintop, right? It's not about being here, it's about getting there. So once we get people into their bodies and to slow down, then we have some invitations that are, it's kind of like dealer's choice. The guide is working in partnership with the land and trying to work with the beings that live in that part of the forest to form relationships between people and the place. And that's where some of the like, I mean, everyone has their own idea of like what is the most impactful experience of the walk. But oftentimes in that middle of the walk, we call that the liminal section of the walk, because it's like you're not really in the tamed world, like our normal way of living and perceiving. And you're not really in animal consciousness, because we're not pushing you to that vision fast place, right? We're not trying to push you to that place where like you become completely disembodied, completely unaware of yourself. So we want you kind of in between, because we find that that's the place where relationships can really be cultivated. And then once we get through those, we end with a tea ceremony. The tea ceremony we think of as kind of a threshold of incorporation, where if you imagine a group of people sitting in a circle and there's a teapot in the center, along the walk, we share with each other using a sharing piece, like a talking piece. And at the end, we invite people to share, like, what would you like to say to feel complete today? And a lot of times it's some very basic but revelatory things where people will say things like, I really need to slow down, or I really just need to go outside more. And it's something about speaking it into reality really like puts it in the brain. And if you can imagine metaphorically that as we each share, we're putting our words into that teapot, and then we're making wild crafted tea. So you're harvesting things from the forest and making this tea. So it's both a literal and a kind of metaphorical incorporation, right? In corpus, taking into the body. So we're taking in the wisdom that we've received from the process, but also the forest itself. So the walk is basically structured. Part of the structure is inspired by some anthropological studies, mostly from the early 20th century, about rites of passage, where in order to do relational work, you have to, Joseph Campbell called it a threshold of separation. And then he talks about a threshold of incorporation. But we like to say a threshold of connection, because we talk about how separation is our endemic state. Like that's how we are all the time. So really we're crossing this threshold into a state of interconnectedness, experiencing the forest in that way, harvesting the experience, and then incorporating it and going back into our normal lives.
I had this opportunity to do a forest therapy walk fairly recently. I think it was in early December. And the part that struck me the most was the slowing down part, because I think, if you're an avid hiker, if you're, just to your earlier point, there's always a destination in mind. And I think the way our guide, Deborah, instructed us, she was like, literally like, I think she connected it to a Rumi quote, but like literally kiss the earth with your feet and take your time and literally observe everything that just catches your eye, whether it's like a tiny little leaf or a scent in the air, or, just really getting us into our senses. And, we walked a very, very short distance, but took our sweet time getting there. And it was the most, it just made a huge impact on me, because I never observed nature in that way,
Right.
Even if you're like immersed in nature, let's say you're like on the hike and you're just kind of like taking a breather or whatever, or getting a snack, and you're stopped, there's still not that observation going on. And that's what I appreciated so much about this practice, the actual conscious observing, and that to me was where I felt like much more connected to the plants around me and the earth and everything.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I've been doing trainings now for 4 years. I've done it all around the world. And you see this kind of over and over and over again, that a lot of people come and they're like, I'm a nature person. Like I'm in nature all the time.
Right.
And then they go on a forest therapy walk and they're like, whoa, that was really different. We did this training in Costa Rica a few years ago. And so the training, it's a 6-month process, but it begins with an 8-day on-site intensive. And on the second to last day, we gather people from the public, and the guides in training guide them for the first time. So we were in this very rural province of Costa Rica in Alajuela, and it was basically a lot of farms, and people had been living on those farms for like 3 or 4 generations. And so we had these farmers come, these kind of like, manly guys, and they're always in nature. And they were in tears, because they were saying, when I'm on the land, most of what I perceive is work that needs to be done. I don't see that the earth is calling to me and asking me to love it and for that it wants to take care of me. I always think that I'm taking care of it. So it's just reorienting perception around like, what is our relationship to this place? And yeah, the hiking thing is another big one where people are always like, I go out in nature all the time. I love hiking. And it's like, yeah, but you're not, and then there's nothing wrong with hiking. Like, hiking is wonderful. It's just a different way of experiencing it. But yeah, you're not going to have the same experience when you're moving fast or when the point of it is, exercise. Like we're not looking to have an athletic experience here. We're really looking to have a bodyful experience.
Yeah. It was also interesting to me to observe what people observed, like in the sharing portion of each of these invitations. I think some people were having a hard time with it, and I think to me what I was seeing was the disconnection like playing out.
Right.
It's almost like by going slow, like they were doing the practice and they were unable to sort of describe what it was that they were feeling or
Right.
what they had observed,
Right.
and I think to me that made also a really deep impact because it showed me just how separate we are from nature, even though we're like in a garden or a park inside the city itself,
Right.
But this kind of relationship that I keep on talking about it was really obvious then.
Right. Well, like we have a lot of cultural training in how to talk about things, but not to like live it, not to have a phenomenological approach of direct experience, because we just don't have a lot of language to describe it. And we also don't really have a lot of we don't have a culture with a high degree of emotional intelligence. So like one of the things I like talking about in trainings is the word pathetic, the etymology, if you trace it back, comes from this thing about pathos, which is like these really strong emotions like sadness and sorrow and pity and love and ecstasy and all these things. And then at a certain point, the word pathetic became redefined as like negative and inferior and bad. So when we think about the context of our emotional reality, we tend to think that thoughts are good and superior to our feelings and our emotions. And a lot of people are really disconnected from having an emotional reality because they've never been given the opportunity to have one. So when people start really feeling in a very deep way, it can be really challenging. And it can be challenging to even describe what it is, because it's like, I've been taught my whole life that this is like negative, that I'm not supposed to feel. Like we have a culture of anesthesia, that it's better to be numb. And part of the numbing is the hyper intellectualization of everything, that like going in nature is about like naming everything and knowing things based on classifications and stuff like that. And people sometimes want to know, what's the name of this tree? Is it a pine tree? And I'm like, have you ever considered that maybe every single pine tree is a different entity, just like human beings? Like if an alien race came and they said, oh, all these humans running around, they're all identical. Like we think of pine tree example, it's like, oh, they're all just pine trees. They have a process and they're all working within the same, basically like a machine, and we know that we don't think about humans like that. But that's kind of our anthropocentric bias, that like humans are really special and then nature is just like a mechanical thing, instead of saying, well, what is the name of this tree and what is the relationship I can have with this tree? That really transforms the way people's perception of the beings and nature can shift.
That is such a beautiful statement. There was one portion of our walk that day where we had to go and just be among these bottle trees, I think from Australia. And Deborah had us, kind of do whatever we felt like, touch the trunk of the tree, just kind of stand up close, maybe even sit next to one and just really observe this little enclave of trees. I think there was like 8 to 10 of them, and really small little like grove. And at one point I, felt compelled to just like put my back against one of the trees, and I just like kind of slid down and sat next to it and closed my eyes. And I shared this with Sam too, because it blew me away. I just felt this overwhelming sense of love coming from that tree. And I didn't feel this with the other trees, but this one particular one, it was so intense that I started tearing up and I had to almost like remove myself because it was really just, it was just really intense,
Yeah.
And I think that day, like to hear the way you just posed it now, like every single tree is different. Every single tree is its own being, I never thought about it in that way, but that's exactly kind of what I experienced, just seeing this tree for who it or she or he is was really powerful.
Yeah.
I also feel like that reframing helps you put into perspective all of their relationships to one another as well,
Right.
So we think of them as just being, to your point, very much like resources, but we don't realize how much they interact with one another and really how intelligent forests
Yeah.
are and in each individual plant is. And I feel like shifting my perspective on what you guys were talking about really helped me understand the intellect and like the very complex relationships that each plant has with the plants around it too.
Yeah, I love that. We've been talking a lot about like the relationship between us and nature. And I think just even in the short time that we've been talking, my understanding of it has shifted as well, and I consider myself a nature lover, just like everybody else. But I'm also curious, what are the physiological benefits of forest therapy?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of research coming out about the health benefits. I actually wanted to read you a quote from this researcher at Griffith University in Australia, because I thought this was wild. So they're researching basically mental health and how often people visit parks, not even going out into like the mountains or whatever, just going to a park. And they said that the research found that 2.5 to 3% of a person's mental health is based on how often they visit parks. While the percentage seems low, it's about the same as the effect of an additional income on a person's mental health.
Wow.
So that's pretty wild, right? Like thinking about if I had a whole nother income, how that would impact my mental health, and then trying to compare that to just like going out into nature. But a lot of the science, there's a woman named Margaret Hansen, and she did a state of the art review of all the Japanese literature. And she focused on a few pieces that have all been kind of validated by research. So, one is immune system function, which relates to the phytoncides and the natural killer cells. Two is cardiovascular health, which relates to hypertension, coronary, and artery disease. One of the interesting things about the research about cardio health is they haven't quite figured this out, but there's something about going into the forest where if you have high blood pressure, it'll lower your blood pressure. Oh, wow. And if you have low blood pressure, it will raise your blood pressure.
That's insane.
So it's not even that it lowers blood pressure, it somehow equalizes whatever you need. And they're really baffled about this. They haven't figured out like, how does this work? Three is respiratory health. Four is depression and anxiety related to mood disorders and stress. And stress is really like the big one. Like we have these dual systems in our body, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, and they're not under our conscious control, whether we're in one or not. A lot of people know about the sympathetic system as fight or flight stress response, and it also includes freeze and fawn. But basically, our ancestors, when like a mountain lion pops out, you need your stress response, you need your sympathetic nervous system. It floods your body with all these chemicals that are going to basically like divert energy and attention from your prefrontal cortex. So you're not working on relationships or learning or like any of this kind of higher function stuff. You're really basically priming your body to run or to fight. And the thing that's interesting about these stress hormones is that when you move your body, it actually depletes those. But right now, I like to joke that like we have this stress machine in our pocket that we call a cell phone. Uh-huh. So, a lot of people are getting into stress response just by what did the president do today? Or, what's going on with global warming or whatever. Like there's all these things that are stressing people out, but they're so sedentary that our bodies are being flooded with these chemicals that we're not actually depleting, and it becomes toxic. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are saying, stress is going to be the health epidemic of the 21st century. And forest therapy, among other things, they're showing a lot of research about stress reduction. And let's see, the other pieces that she looked at, mental relaxation, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. There's a whole bunch of research about the concept of awe, like when you're in awe of something and how that galvanizes gratitude and selflessness.
Yeah.
And they have this a theory from a pair of researchers. They're married, called the Kaplans, and they talk about attention restoration hypothesis. So basically, what they're talking about is how like the brain can only have real focus for so long. It's like a rubber band, you know, you only have a certain amount of bandwidth to be focusing. And at a certain point, you can actually exhaust your brain and it becomes very challenging to focus. So they're really looking at this in terms of like corporate wellness and stuff like that, where they're like,
Right.
how can we become more focused, more creative, more productive? And yeah, they're finding that if you're focused directly on something all the time, that you lose the ability to actually maintain focus. So these are just some of the things, but you know, a lot of the Japanese stuff is focused mostly on the physiological health stuff. And now we're seeing a lot of renewed interest in the mental health piece as well. And then I think at a certain point, people are going to arrive at the place where they start to acknowledge that relational health is actually kind of the foundation for those pieces as well, that all three are interwoven together. Mm-hmm. So it all kind of has to happen together. There's this wonderful scientist named Gus Speth, and he has this quote. It's like a meme on Facebook and stuff. He says, "I used to think that the biggest ecological problems were, you know, species lost and ocean acidification and this and that with 30 years of good education, we could change this. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy."
Wow. Yeah.
And that's something that scientists don't know how to change. And Gus Speth talks about, you know, to do that, we need to have a cultural and spiritual transformation. So going back to the kind of difference between extractive paradigms and relational paradigms, it's like, yeah, without this relational piece, without the change in perception, we can't really grapple with some of the most core fundamental problems facing society. Mm-hmm. And now with the rise of like eco trauma and eco anxiety, with the fires and ocean rising and all that, then there's this added challenge of people having like a traumatic break in their relationship with nature, and then not being able to work towards any sort of reconciliation or health in that way. We're actually about to do a training in Chico where we're going to train 20 mental health professionals who are going to work with campfire survivors. I'm really excited about that. And then we're hoping we can pilot it in Chico and then take that to Australia and do a series of trainings there as well.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
I have a question about the forest bathing piece of it though. Like, so are all forests made equal?
No. I mean, okay, if you ask me from my perspective, yes. Like I always tell people, you know, it's like, nature, there is no separation between nature and what we call civilization, right? Like I'm in downtown Los Angeles right now. I can see trees outside the window. I can see birds. I can see sky. There's rivers. And not to mention that everything in our world is made from nature, you know, our clothing, our buildings, our furniture, everything. There's no separation when we really get down to it. So for me, like I lead forest therapy walks in downtown LA sometimes, and it's just as wonderful and powerful. And, you know, doing work at the LA Arboretum, I do work in the Angeles National Forest. I do work downtown in the LA Arboretum. These are very different, you know, ecological environments, and yet they all are capable. We can have a relationship with any place. It doesn't matter what it looks like or what lives there. But if you want to talk about the health science end, then no, not all forests are created equal. The Japanese research tends to say that evergreen trees produce the most phytoncides. So evergreen trees, because they need to defend themselves through the winter and they don't go into this kind of dormant stage where they kind of wall themselves off, they're the ones that if you're looking at forest therapy and you're like, I really want to use this as a preventative treatment for cancer and autoimmune disease, then the recommendation is find a pine tree and go sit under it for 30 minutes a day, you know. But if you're looking at it about like, how can I repair my relationship with the world, you could just, you know, go find it. I've sat with a tree in a parking lot and been like, oh my God, this is amazing.
That actually makes me feel good to hear you say that, you know, because my follow-up question was like, okay, forest therapy, as you know, as your organization kind of defines it, is a 3-hour long process with these invitations. But really, like, it sounds like if you just spend time consciously with a tree or a plant or whatever, you can also still reap the benefits.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just like people often want to know, if I don't have access to a guide or whatever, like how can I do this at home? And I'm like, so one of our invitations is called Sit Spot. It's very simple. Find a place your body wants to sit and just give yourself permission to do nothing for 20 or 30 minutes. And basically what happens is, assuming people don't bring their phone and they're not distracted, the first 10 minutes are usually challenging because we have a productivity bias and we're like, this is stupid. What am I doing? I'm just sitting here. I could be doing other things. And then something shifts where all of a sudden it's like they notice a flower that they've been sitting next to for 10 minutes and they've never seen it. It's as if it just like manifested there. Then they get very fascinated by that. And then they look over and, and then there's a tree over here. And, look at the texture of that bark. And then they see a hawk in the sky or whatever. Like there's kind of this watershed moment where all of a sudden there's like this effortless presence and people are really just there. And even though they may not be fully aware of it, what's really happening is the cultivation of a relationship. So like when we train guides in their 6-month practicum, we say, go find a sit spot and try to sit there 2 or 3 times a week for 6 months.
Just the same spot.
The same spot. Just go back to the same spot. And it's amazing because you see the same spot in all its seasons with its changes. And you not only begin to feel like you know the space in an intimate way, but that it knows you as well, that it tends to recognize you and that you are a part of it. It's not that you're like a foreign observer. It's you're becoming enmeshed in that place. And there is a real relationship that is based in like a love and an appreciation of that place. And it doesn't matter where it is. It could just be your backyard,
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I'm going to start practicing that today.
How close do you have to sit to these plants for... like I'm picturing somebody in the city who maybe, to your point, like the only plant that's near them is a tree in a parking lot. Do they have to sit like right up against the trunk? I mean,
no, whatever feels right for you is fine.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
This is such a cool approach.
I think it's cool to like have it from all angles. Like some days I want to lay on my back and look up through the branches. Someday I want to like put my back against the trunk. Someday I want to observe it from 30 meters away. Like, it's like, if you think about a relationship with human beings, part of the pleasure is in knowing them as a changing person. Like sometimes we see people, like when you're in a long-term relationship with a friend or a romantic partner, the person that you meet is not the person that is there 5 years later or 10 years later. So part of the joy and the pleasure is in the surprise and the like evolution of relationship. And then, oh, wow. Like, like a lot of people get kind of a kick out of seeing just the change in the leaves, like, or the flower and the fruit and knowing it and knowing when it's going to come and seeing that, year after year after year. And then it's like, yeah, this being, you have a relationship with it and it's going to surprise you and it's never going to be the same day to day. That you go to the same sit spot over and over again, you're inevitably going to discover new things constantly.
God, I love this so much.
I do too, especially because I recently moved and I have this vine in my backyard that was like it looked really sad a few weeks ago. And then we hung this just metal decor thing on this wall where this vine was. And all of a sudden it was like overnight, the vine had stretched all the way up to this metal piece and is now starting to wrap around it. And my friend was telling me that, that they need something to reach for.
Yes.
Otherwise they become stagnant. And I am like so fascinated by this vine now. I cannot get enough of it. I take pictures of it every day because I'm like, oh my God, it grew another inch. Like, what's happening? Look at these branches over here.
And that's kind of part of the whole thing about tending a place and tending to these beings. It's like, I think oftentimes people that have cats and dogs know what it's like to be in love with a non-human being, right? And that like my dog is not every dog. Like my dog has its own personality. We have this relationship and it's a sensory relationship. It's not an intellectual relationship. Like the love is expressed by, being physically close, the petting. When you're touching it, it's touching you back and forth, right? And there's a love and a reciprocity there. and then seeing that you can extend that to other beings as well. And it's not just things that we tend to think of as being, quote, alive or sentient or whatever. It's like even rocks and rivers and sky and ocean, like having that depth of relationship where you just keep going back over and over again. Because yeah, if you spend 10 minutes with a dog, it's not going to be the same as 10 years, right? Like, it's about the depth and about the level of sensory connection. Sometimes I tell people, like, okay, imagine someone you love, someone that you feel like you really have a deep relationship with. Now imagine that I give you a book and it has all the information about them, what species they are, where they were born, how they grew up, what school they went to, their friends, their activities, all that stuff. But you've never seen them. You've never smelled them. You've never touched them. You've never felt them hug you. You've never kissed them. You've had no sensory contact, but intellectually, you know everything about them. Could you love that person? And what is love? And a lot of people kind of come to that feeling of like, yeah, love is not something that is intellectual. It's, I like Blaise Pascal has this thing about the heart. He says the heart has reason that reason can never know. And it's kind of this dual intelligence that humans possess. We have an intellectual understanding of the world around us, but then the imaginal and the heart-centered experience, the phenomenology of being alive and being in relationship and having experiences like love, it doesn't make sense to talk about it through a scientific lens. It just doesn't work that way. You can't break love down into an order of operations and say, this is how you love something. It organically arises through the proximity and through our senses.
And not only that, not to shallow the subject at all, but it's kind of like we're doing our own experiment culturally like that with online dating and apps, right?
Yes.
Where it's like we're trying to intellectually and logically summarize a whole person in a single profile and then decide if we could create a relationship around that, which is crazy.
Right.
I mean, and sometimes it works. I know a lot of people who it's worked for, but I don't think it's because of the step within the app.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
No, that's a really good comparison. Because we're all stuck in these most of us, urban environments, I'm curious what a forest therapy walk looks like in downtown LA.
Well, I do it at what used to be called the Cornfield. It's now California State Park, Heritage Park. I forget the name they gave it now. But basically, it's like getting people to understand that there's no division and getting people to understand that, like, except maybe for like the space station, like we're incapable of creating spaces that actually exclude nature. And furthermore, we are nature. So anywhere we go is nature, right? And trying to kind of break down that cognitive barrier, that intellectual barrier of like, this isn't nature. Nature looks like, Yosemite or Vancouver Island or whatever. It has to look a certain way. It has to feel a certain way. And it's like, well, if you can just let go of that for 3 hours, and it's easy to let go of that once we kind of drop out of our intellectual process and into our embodied process, because we're here right now. Like the body can't be anywhere else. Right? The mind can wander off into a million dimensions, but the body is very rooted here in this place and in this moment. So once you're here now, it just kind of unfolds, right? A big part of our work is kind of based around this idea that, so we have the tamed world that we live in, and then there's the wilderness, and then there's this liminality, this space in between it. And part of the thing about the tamed world is that we talk about how the culture that we live in really tames us by creating perception of reality. And the tamed world tends to exclude certain parts of what I describe as our wholeness, that we are born kind of with a wholeness to us. And then as we are educated and acculturated, certain things get excluded. And the three that I'm really focusing on right now are the imagination. There's this kind of scientific idea that only what can be measurable and observed is real. Everything else is imaginary. And a lot of scholars have talked about the difference between imaginary and imaginal. that imaginary is a fantasy, but imaginal is our ability to perceive what is not measurable. So by excluding the imagination from our perception, we're excluding a huge part of how we relate to the world. The second piece is what I call nature relation. So instead of nature connection, this idea that we can connect to nature, nature relation is saying, no, we are nature. And we are biologically related to everything here. It's interesting that a lot of scientists will buy into Darwin's theory of evolution, but Darwin was talking about how if you go back far enough, human beings are genetically related to trees. We're related to all the plants, all the animals that live here. We're part of a giant family. And, you know, if you break it down to a chemical or an atomic level, then we're really related to everything. There's really no separation. But that's part of the taming that, you know, Descartes was really a big factor in this aspect of the taming, saying, no, humans are over here and everything else is over here. Humans are special and they have soul and spirit. And then nature is just a machine, you know. And then the third piece is what I call bodyfulness. And I like talking about bodyfulness now instead of mindfulness, because there's this wonderful book by Christine Caldwell called Bodyfulness, and I loved it. And she talks about how a big part of our culture is about hating the body, thinking that the body is a work that needs to be kind of like, instead of it needs to be loved for what it is, it needs to be made better all the time. This is so LA, right?
100%.
And it's like, you're ashamed of your body, you're numb, you're disconnected from it. You don't think that the body has an inherent intelligence to it, that intelligence is a function of the mind and that the body doesn't know. But like, children are very bodyful, right? And they know how to let the body guide them and how the body's intelligence can lead them into experiences that are essential for wholeness. So getting people into a liminal space, it's interesting because the nature relation, the bodyfulness, and the imaginal all kind of arise. And it's like people are contacting these pieces of what has always been there. It's like going back to, you asked me to define forest therapy. I always talk about it's remembering. I'm not teaching you anything new. You were born with all of these things and you've forgotten them, or they've been obfuscated by taming. And now we're going to touch those again and recontact those. And that's where a lot of these kind of big healing moments happen for people, putting aside the physiological mental health benefits. And maybe those things interlace with the relational stuff. But like, if you just want to focus on the relational pieces, having a relationship with our imagination, with our body, and with nature is a revolutionary action in a tamed world. And that the tamed world, it's important that it's not a bad world. It's that the tamed world is kind of oppressed by the system that it has created. And so by incorporating, by bringing these things back from liminality, we're not only healing ourselves, but we're also healing our culture to a certain extent, because we are becoming more whole. And it's not about like, forest therapy is not political, right? It's not like, this is what we need to do, this is what we shouldn't do. It's like, it all starts with me, right? It all starts with each of us feeling alive and feeling whole. I use this Joseph Campbell quote a lot. He says, I don't think people are looking for the meaning of life. I think they're looking for the experience of being alive. And I think that's the taming part, where we spend so much time thinking about the meaning of life. What's my legacy? Is my work important? Should I have kids? Should I do this? Should I do that? And very rarely do we arrive at this feeling of aliveness that is so essential to our well-being.
And not realizing also that if you direct yourself at feeling alive, everything tends to come with it too.
Right.
It's a domino effect, a
right.
ripple out effect.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love Joseph Campbell. It's awesome. And I also love this concept of being bodyful. Like, just, I feel like fairly recently, Sam and I have had many conversations about body intelligence and being in our bodies again and things like that. Because yeah, the mindfulness movement has like just kind of, I feel like, focused so much attention on what the mind is, which is really not even really your brain. It's your whole body that's
right.
your mind, contains or is defined by. But yeah, I've been having some more profound experiences, just being more conscious about what my body's trying to tell me when I'm speaking about certain things in my life, or the tension that happens in certain areas in my body, and really starting to pay attention to that. I mean, it's been blowing my mind too.
And it's interesting that the body actually houses a lot of the trauma that we are not consciously aware of. So the brain is very sophisticated and it can repress the trauma, and we can be completely 100% unaware that it exists, but the body remembers. So when you get people into that bodyful place, you can actually start operating on the trauma. And I guess I should just be really clear, within forest therapy, we say the forest is the therapist, the guide opens the doors. So the guides are not therapists. Like, we're not prescribing or diagnosing what you need to do in order to have a healing or any sort of relational experience. But somehow the forest, I mean, this is going to sound kind of misty woo woo and whatever, and I can't fully explain it to you, but there's a way that the relationship between the participant and the forest forms a healing contract, and it's very unique. And that when people are ready to deal with their trauma, the forest has a way of supporting it in ways that feel, and this word is so like edgy for people, but it feels magical in some way. Like,
Yeah.
I was doing a training once, and this woman came back from an invitation, and the invitation was really just to like sit with a tree. It was very basic. Like, we're never prescribing emotional or cognitive experiences. We're only getting people into sensory experiences. So she went and sat with a tree, and she came back and she told this story about never having grieved the loss of her father. And she was staring at the bark of the tree, and then she was feeling like it was like the wrinkles in his face, and she was seeing her father's face in the tree, and then she started crying, and then she felt like the tree, it was like she was watering the tree with her tears.
Wow.
And I didn't tell her to have this experience. It organically arose just from being in the body, right?
Wow.
So the body kind of remembers this stuff that needs to be worked out. It's like all knotted up inside you. And when you alleviate the cultural pressure of, no, like, let's stay in the head, let's not go into the body. When you actually put that aside and get people to go down into the body, it just naturally is going to arise. And then the forest really holds people in their process in a way that really works.
God, that is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
recently, I've been thinking about this idea because I'm a breathwork guide, right? I've been wanting to actually hit up Descanso Gardens to see if they would want to do a breathwork in their.
Maybe we could tag team that. Let's do forest therapy, breathwork,
yes.
Descanso Gardens.
Oh my gosh, I would love that because I'm really starting to come into the understanding that as a guide, I'm not doing anything. I'm creating the setting and bringing people together, but every one of us has the capability of healing ourselves. Our bodies know how to heal itself.
Right.
It's just getting it out of the way and allowing it to do what it needs to do. And
right.
I love that nature is there to support it. And, and it really is about that connection back, how all of us are kind of connected in spirit.
One of my favorite little like pithy things that I like to say on trainings is you can't open a rose with a crowbar. And it's like, a lot of people, like, I think we have a bias about fixing people in our culture where it's like, if there's a problem, that I need to fix it for you, when in reality, that person needs to fix it for themselves. And that's the only sustainable solution. So you can't make something beautiful happen, even if it's rooted in a good intention, that like, I want to alleviate your suffering, so let me operate upon you, but it's not going to be a long-term solution. You might obfuscate the pain for a little while, but the problem is still there. So you have to hold people in that container where they're able to actually do some self-directed work. And then beautiful things happen just organically in their own time. And it's also interesting that people need different things in different moments, and that as a guide, I have no clue what you need in this moment.
Right.
There's like an ongoing conversation in our community of guides about like the nature of prescription and the ethics of getting people to do things that maybe they need to do, but is it right to assume that I know what you need? And one of the things that always pops up is this thing about letting go. So there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, I think letting go is really powerful and it's really good and it's really necessary. And it's like, well, yeah, but okay, number one, like letting go is kind of a loaded concept where like a lot of time, like minority groups and women have been told to just let it go. Like, oh, you have a problem? Just let it go. And it's like, well, that's not really a healthy way of dealing with this. You're just like, I'm just repressing it. I'm not actually letting it go because there's been no transformation. There's been no reconciliation or healing here. So basically you're just asking me to just get over it.
Yeah.
Which isn't particularly helpful. But then the other interesting thing is like, so there was a guide who did a wonderful presentation on this at our conference, and she talked about how she lost a child and forest therapy became part of her healing process. And that with this trauma, she noticed that some days she needed to hold on. Some days she needed to let go. Some days she needed to laugh. Some days she needed to cry. Some days she needed to be silent. Some days she needed to scream. So healing people, like when people are doing healing work, it's not about like, this is what you must do and this is how it works for everyone. It's like everyone is in a unique process, and it's a dynamic process. It's not linear. It's not like, here are the steps that you're going to take to get to your healing place. It's like every day is going to be a journey. Every moment is going to be a journey. How do we get you to a space where your relationship with the world and with yourself is giving you the tools that you need in this moment, as opposed to having these kind of generalizations about healing work where it's like, just let go, just go and let it go.
Right. Wow, that's really beautiful. That story was really, really powerful.
Well, it goes back to just even like all the like how you were stating that every single tree is individual, every single, it's kind of recognizing all of our uniqueness,
Right.
know, and honoring that too. How did you get into this?
So the condensed story is about 10 years ago, I got really interested in a practice called counsel, the way of counsel. And counsel is a listening practice. So with human beings, you're sitting in a circle, you have a talking piece, and there's a kind of a container that is set and a prompt that you are invited to speak to. And what the whole philosophy around circle is basically that, like, the wisdom of any group is at the center of the circle. No one's story is more valuable than anyone else's. And that you can think of it like that story about stone soup. Like, the more things you add, the more diversity of perspective and experience, it becomes like a mirror unto your own process, that your healing is informed by the healing processes around you. That when we're really vulnerable and we can speak from the heart, knowing that people will listen from the heart, we can have some very transformative experiences. So I was doing a training called The Nature of Counsel in the Owens Valley. And basically the idea with that program was, how do we extend these principles to including the more than human world in our circle? How do we learn how to listen to the mountain and the sky and the animals and the trees and all the beings? So on the last day of the program, we did like a 24-hour solo vision fast up in the Inyo Mountains. And we came out of that, and Amos was actually like a program assistant on that program. And after you do the fast, you kind of have like a break your fast, and you eat. And we were having this like feast, and he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, I want to show you this thing." I had met him a couple times before, but we were friends. And he said, "Okay, close your eyes." And he took me by the shoulders and he led me up to this enormous redwood tree. And he said, "Okay, now open your eyes." I was like an inch away from it. And it was kind of this awakening moment for me of realizing that I wasn't actually paying attention, that like most of what was going on around me was being lost in translation. And it was like a real incredible moment of just seeing what was right in front of me and not being distracted. And I said, "Well, that's nice. Thank you." And he said, "You should come take this training that I'm going to do in Northern California." And it was funny because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Like, I really thought it was going to be more like a personal practice. I didn't understand that he had a vision of creating like a global network of certified professional guides and basically creating a new job category. A forest therapy guide. There are very few of us doing full-time work right now, but it's like yoga was 30 years ago, right? Like, it's a process of cultural definition that at the beginning, people don't recognize the value, but at a certain point, people all want it. And the trajectory of forest therapy is actually like the curve is much sharper than yoga's was. So yeah, I think in some ways, it's like right time, right place. In some ways, I think it's a little bit like destiny. I have some serious questions about free will and whether that actually exists. But I grew up about 3/4 of a mile from Walden Pond. Oh, wow. And so Emerson and Thoreau and these kind of like big nature connection guys were a big part of my regional education. And then when I was a senior in high school, I had a really good teacher. And he had us read Walden over the course of a semester. And the last chapter we read at the site of Thoreau's cabin at sunrise before school started. So we read the chapter, and then he was so funny. Shout out to Bill Schechter if you're out there anyway. He said, well, I have to go to work now because I'm going to be fired if I don't show up for work. But you're all seniors in high school. You should just skip school and you should take a walk, just like a silent solo walk around Walden. And don't feel like Thoreau is the expert. You're the expert. It's about your relationship to this place. So it's not about reading Thoreau and saying, now I've consumed Walden. You have no idea. This is just the beginning of the journey. So now I want you to go have some direct experience with this place and really like figure it out for yourself. And I think in some ways that was really like a watershed moment for me in my practice, even not knowing that, years later I'd be in the position I am now, but thinking about, just like, I grew up in a space where I felt that I was friends with the land. I was one of those kids that like my parents didn't want me to watch TV. I didn't have siblings that I lived with. So I spent a lot of time outside and just getting to know the place and paying attention to it. Mary Oliver has this wonderful poem where she says, attention is the beginning of devotion. And it's like, I was a religious studies major in my undergrad. My master's was in human development and social change. So all of it kind of tied together with forest therapy in many ways. It was like, this is such an important kind of cultural movement in a way. And it's not really about politics or money. It's just like, if we're going to survive as a species, then we kind of need to address the growing threat of disconnection and alienation and the deterioration of relationships. Like, I see this a lot working with young people, that I think it's really the digitization of the world has really created like a culture of alienation and a furthered a culture of anesthesia that we really need to be working with people now to help them get back into their bodies and help them feel and to help them have an emotional reality that connects them to the world.
I'm becoming, as I've been kind of going through this journey and reflecting and deepening my breathwork practice, there is a platform message that I'm starting to create in my head, which is just normalize pain, and it's something that I feel really like strongly about, because you're right. I think the fact that we're unable to look at ourselves and face it. Like, in fact, I was talking to a friend, and this person had done breath work before, but she was a little nervous about doing it again because of how intense the first session was. And I told her, like, well, maybe you should examine why. Like, why do you have that fear?
Yeah.
And maybe there's something in there that you're a little bit afraid to see, and why, like, and I think so many of us struggle with that too. Just like being brave enough or being ready to face what's inside of us.
Right.
I think that's why I connect so much with like forest therapy too, because just like breath work, breath work is really a relationship with yourself,
Right.
and forest therapy is a relationship with yourself, with nature, but with every living being.
Right.
And it's really, really beautiful, and incredibly healing. And I know I'm going to go through the forest therapy like training program at some point.
I know. The longer we talk about this, the more I'm like, I've got to do that. I'm kind of obsessed now.
We're doing a training in Southern California next month. You should come.
Stop it. Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll be there.
God. We'll have to look into this. Last question from me.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, I feel like this whole hour has been packed with wisdom and insights and nuggets that I just like want to transcribe the whole thing and just make them into like little quote cards. But I'm curious, what is the biggest takeaway that you have had personally from doing this work?
I think that thing about you can't open a rose with a crowbar is a really big learning. Like, this is kind of the idea that I think it grounds almost everything I do with circle work, which is what I now refer to as counsel, forest therapy, school I was telling you about. It's like each of us is on our own journey, and there's no authority that can give it to you. Like, you have to walk the path. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that I can do to make you have. I know that I can manipulate you into having a powerful experience, but it will never be as powerful as your authentic experience would have been. And that's something that when I train guides, that's one of the hardest things to get people to understand, because a lot of people come in with this kind of healer archetype mindset. They're like, I'm going to heal people. And it's like, no, you're not going to heal people. You're going to create a space where people can heal themselves, and you're just going to bear witness to it and really hold them in a supportive way. And that's so powerful, but it's so counterintuitive to the way most people are taught to think about that relationship or that dynamic between kind of people in healing arts and people that are receiving that healing. And then I guess the other big one is just that like everything is connected. That like our health and the health of all beings, it's the same. Like we are nature. If we're not cultivating a good relationship, we're not ever going to be able to like fix it with science or, you know, philosophy or whatever. It's like there's no intellectual idea that can make people more related to nature. It's just through a very simple practice of getting out there and being with it. It's not about thinking or, you know, teaching people how to do it, whatever. I think people find the solutions that make sense to them through that relationship, but it doesn't make sense to go in and say like, I'm the expert here. This is what you need to do, X, Y, and Z. And then you're going to have a great thing going on. It's like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Sam, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm so excited to learn more about this training program that you're doing next month. But oh my gosh, what incredible interview. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
All right. So you can find more information about the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy at www.natureandforesttherapy.org.
If you want to find out about forest therapy events within your city, definitely hit up that website.
Yes, and trainings.
And trainings. There's guides everywhere, and especially in the LA area, you know, Ben and several others are always doing regular forest therapy walks at the LA Arboretum, maybe even in Descanso Gardens pretty soon. So
cool.
Check it out.
And it seems like I'm joking, but I'm totally going to start a GoFundMe page to get funding to go do the training in Costa Rica because I'm so obsessed. This is like the coolest thing ever. So you guys, fund me.
And if you guys are in need of any daily ritual tools, soul care tools, come visit us at daughtersbrand.com. Online, we have a bunch of aromatherapy candles and sprays, anything you need to help with your daily rituals. And if you enjoyed this episode as much as we did in making it, please rate and review us and leave us some comments and tell us what you think, because it really does help us do our best and evolve and grow. And we love what we do, so we want to keep on doing it. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks.
Music for Wu Nu is composed by Adam Miller.